I don't know if I'm going to even publish this video, but I have to get something off my chest. So I'm going to record it and then I'll decide after I record it. I am upset and I try to shake this feeling and I've tried to get over it. I've tried to move on, like I tell other people to. I say forgiveness is a productivity hack. It's one of the things that I say often. But this one I just can't shake. And my instincts have served me pretty well in the past. So I think I just need to say this. Okay. So there's a company that most of us know about, especially on YouTube, we know about it. And this company, I'm going to tell you the company name, so I'm not going to keep that from you. But this company is worth more than a billion with a B, $1 billion today. And I discovered them. We'll put that in air quotes. I discovered them um, the first hour they were a company. The first hour they were public, right? This was May of 2013, and I discovered them because they went live, and a lot of people did. A few thousand people saw their website when they went live, for sure. But what a few thousand people did not do is what I did next, which is the first hour they were live, I emailed their two co-founders. And I said to them, this was 2013, so it was 2.5 years before I got my first investor. So I had been working on um, finding and working with entrepreneurs and investors to build a venture fund that I would go on to build 200 companies later um, in 2015, which is awesome. But this was at a time where I was really, really broke. I was living with my mother in Pearland, Texas. We didn't have a lot of money at all, and I couldn't afford like a plane ticket or anything like that. Um, but I was looking at companies and I was really excited about companies and helping them and seeing what I could do. And I wanted to start a fund around that. Originally, though, I wanted to work at a fund. So I had been reaching out to different investors and seeing if I could be their apprentice or be their assistant. And that was happening at the same time. So that's important to the story. So I'll tell you what the company name is so you can understand kind of what it was like back then. The company is called Patreon, and you probably know it. It's worth at least $1.5 billion today. I met it when it was, I think they were at a $4 million valuation. Whew, yeah, so that's a lot of money. Um, So yeah, and bear with me because I, I didn't plan to do this video. I can't even believe I'm doing it, but I think it's important that I do it for myself to maybe let some of this off of like have other people carry it with me, if that makes sense. Okay, so I'll tell you what happened and I'll tell you what I believe should happen next. So Patreon, again, this major behemoth of a company today that has makes, hundreds of millions of dollars a year, I think. They were tiny. They were just starting out. It was Jack and Sam, the two co-founders. Jack is a musician. Sam is more the engineer. They knew each other, I believe, from college, and probably Stanford, if I had to guess. I'm sure it's Stanford or something like that. And I had reached out to them almost immediately when I saw this because I was like, this is amazing. I knew it was happening and then I saw it live. I said, this is amazing. Can I get you coffee? Can I do whatever um just to be around this? Because I was even willing at the time to just kind of give up on a fund and work at Patreon because I just thought it was so absolutely amazing. And I didn't really care or know much about the YouTube side of it. I didn't it wasn't really like I was standing up for like, oh yeah, YouTube doesn't pay enough. I wasn't really thinking about that. If you know anything about their kind of how they started, it was because they said that YouTube didn't pay them enough, so they wanted creators to have a way to get paid in other ways. That wasn't really my thing. I was more like, this is what, like to me, if Kickstarter is raising money for a house, Patreon on this monthly basis, even back then I was thinking about recurring revenue, okay? Patreon on this recurring monthly basis was like paying for groceries and utilities. And I saw how profitable and impactful Kickstarter had been. And I said, and this is what I wrote in emails when I wrote to investors. So anyway, I reached out to them. I said, hey, I just think what you're doing is fantastic. Can I help you in any way? And I was joking about the coffee, but I was like, can I work there? And or can I help you raise money? Because I had started talking to investors and kind of building a network. The same thing I tell you to do, which is build the network that you want in the future. Start building it today. Don't wait for a time. So I was doing that. I had no money, but I was building relationships. And so I could get this in front of some angel investors, a couple of VCs, and I wanted to know if they wanted me to do that. And so I was talking mainly with Sam because Jack was kind of the CEO and the artist and you know, the enigma. And I was talking to Sam, and he said he's at first he said no, we're not looking for outside funding. And then about a week later, he wrote me back and said actually, and he reached out to me and he said actually Jack wants to raise $1 million. So if it would be great if you could introduce us to some investors. And I imagined at that point they had some friends and they were in San Francisco. I knew they had some friends and I had some, people I could reach out to. So I was stoked. I was excited. I was like, yeah, absolutely. So I sent out, 15 emails to angels from all over the world who I had started talking to, and mostly online, right? And I sent it out to them, and many of them were interested, and I connected them through email. And I'm not sure. I honestly, I'm not sure which of those, if any, turned into investments. If their check sizes were too small, or if it wasn't the right fit, if it happened, or if it did happen, but it was quietly happened in the background. Quietly happened in the background. So if you were one of those investors and you did invest at that round, please let me know. But then I also sent this email to a venture fund, and I sent it to a particular partner, and I'll tell you the fund in his name. And I sent it to him because in January of 2013, the same year, 12 years ago, I had sent him a 17-minute video applying to be his apprentice. And it's because he had like a public apply to be my apprentice contest, really. And I had missed the deadline because I didn't know about it. So I recorded this very raw. I was sitting on the floor of the place we were living at the time because we didn't have a lot of furniture. So I was sitting on the floor and I recorded this heartfelt video that I've since watched in the last couple of years. And I would have hired me. It was pretty profound. And I know I'm saying that for myself, but I don't remember filming it. So it's like it's a different person. And it was remarkable. And maybe I'll find it. I can't get into it right now, but maybe I'll find it and download it and show it to you if I show you this video. But I had sent him that in January, and so we had started talking to each other through email, just, here and there. And I would send him deals. I sent him about three quote unquote deals where it was like I knew of the company. I wanted to see what he thought of it. And looking back on it, I was looking at my emails earlier to record this. They were not really strong, but it was something there was a good reason they sent it to him, sent it to him based on his other investments. So I felt pretty good about it. I sent Patreon to this person in an email, and I'll tell you his name. His name is George Zachary, and the venture fund is CRV, Charles River Ventures. And I know that Charles River Ventures is an investor in a lot of companies, and I know that they have a lot of partners and that they have done some good stuff in the world. So I'm not really going after them. I want to tell you the rest of the story, and I want you to tell me what you would do in this situation or what you think should be done here. And I do hope that someone from Charles River or someone who is associated with them sees this and makes it right. Like I really do. So, okay. So I send this email to George, and I say, I really believe in this company. I reached out to them within an hour of seeing it. I told a thing about the Kickstarter and the groceries and all that, and I said, I think you need to look at this. And a few days later, he wrote me back and he had been traveling or something. That's becomes a theme in his messages. He'd been traveling and living his best life. And he said, I've done this. No, I congratulated him at the time. I congratulated him for making the Midas list once again. The Midas list, if you're not familiar, is this big list by Forbes that happens every year for the most successful venture capitalists. And it's mainly men and it's mainly white men, and it's time and time and time and time again. It very rarely deviates from that. Sometimes there's more women on it. Now there's more women on it, and they have these lists now that are like up and comers, so you see more diversity there. But it's usually the same usual suspects that are just rich over and over and over again making deals. And yes, you could say that they're it's deserved, but it's like being on third base, starting at third base. If you have, I won't go into too much of a tangent, but essentially, if you have that kind of network to begin with, then you're constantly seeing deals that are really, really, really good. And if you are seeing deals that are really, really good and you're being allowed into those deals, then you also can put a little pressure on the scales and make those deals good, right? Like you can introduce those founders to the right people and give them enough money to start. And it's just this self-perpetuating thing. And then you give each other awards, right? So he's a Midas guy, and I don't know if what he's doing today, so I don't know if he's a Midas guy still, but he's made a lot of money, a lot of money. They did some stuff with Twitter early on, and they've made a lot of money. So he responds to me and he says, "I've been traveling. I took a look at Patreon, and he said something along the lines of, it's good but not great. I don't get a great sense from it. It's not something exciting to me, so I'll pass." And I said, great, and you can see my emails. It's just like, oh, it's cool. Okay, thanks for taking a look. And, very docile and very, early stages of what I'm doing here. I've gone on to invest in 200 companies and I've seen thousands of pitches since then. So I wouldn't play it the same. But back then, that's the innocence that was there. So he passes. And this is actually helping me to talk about this. So if you are watching, thank you. Yeah, so he passes and I say, okay. So then, I send who I can to them. I wish at 100,000% that I had $25,000 at the time because they were raising 1 million on a $4 million valuation. I really wish that I had, some money at the time. I had zero money. I could barely pay for rent, let alone, day-to-day stuff. So I went on to say, hey, can I come out to San Francisco? Can I meet with you? And I actually flew to San Francisco. I got to put the money together, flew there to see if they could hire me. And they did not. But they weren't obligated to. So that's all good. I continued to send opportunities their way, not only on the investor side, but I sent them multiple people like Amanda Palmer. So I had worked with Amanda Palmer in a different life, and Amanda Palmer had done extremely well on Kickstarter. As a musician, had done extremely well on Kickstarter. So I sent Amanda Palmer to them as someone who could be like a major player on Patreon. I sent them um, before she had her show, before she had any of that, but she was killing it. Ground roots, grassroots. I sent Issa Rae. I didn't even know Issa at the time. I know her now, but I didn't even know her at the time. But I said, she's killing it. This is an audience they are never going to touch ever, ever with on their own. Would they touch this audience? Let's put together. Issa went to Stanford. They went to Stanford. Let's do it, right? So I did those types of things, just kind of along the way. um and so this was May of 2013 where I sent this information to, like, mid-May, where I sent it to George Zachary. And like the 1st of August of the same year, so 10 weeks later, I wake up one day to an announcement on Forbes News, I believe it was, that CRV was leading their round of funding. And when it makes it to the newspaper or makes it to an article, it's already been in the works for weeks. Doesn't happen overnight. That's just how it works. So it had been going on for weeks behind closed doors. And I was not given one bit of credit for sure, or heads up, or like, thanks for sending this our way. No, nor from Sam and Jack was I given a, hey, thank you for introducing us to this group. So I reached out, and again, this if you saw this email, you'd see how innocent it was. And I was like, "Oh, you're so nice, Arlan from 12 years ago." I reached out to George and I said, "Hey, I just saw that you all led this round. Is that true? I just wanted to know because I could be working there, and I think it would be great if you all are involved." I was very innocent about it. And he wrote back this long email, the longest email he's ever written to me. So it tells me today that he was trying to like really overcompensate. And he wrote this long email where he talks about how he was gone. He was in Greece for a month. Every partner has their own, autonomy. They can make their own decisions. So when he passed, little did he know that another partner, and kind of a pat on the head. Thanks for sending it my way. Thanks for thinking of me. Thanks for thinking of me is what he said. Um, And so, okay, all right. So here's what I'll tell you what happened next, but I'll also tell you what I did wrong, and I hope that it helps someone else. I didn't have anything other than the emails where I kind of casually said I was helping, and I have those emails, but I didn't have anything in writing that said I was like officially helping them raise money. I didn't have anything in writing for any VC firms that said that I was a scout, or I didn't, at the time, I didn't have a clue what a scout was, that they existed. And a scout, if you're not familiar, is someone who works with a venture fund and it helps them find deals. And then when they find a deal that they actually invest in, they get a piece of that. They get something. They might put a little bit of money into it on their own. Like they may have like $25,000 they can put into a deal, and they share the carry, which is the carried interest, the profits from anything that happens in the future. Or it could be even more than that. And a lot of times it was under cloak and dagger. It was like back then, certainly it was very closed off. It was what Sam Altman did behind closed doors. These are not bad things. It's just what they had access to. It's what Jason Calacanis did. It's how he got into Uber. It's how Sam got into, everything else. He now runs OpenAI, ChatGPT. Um, but I didn't know these existed. And so I was doing the work of a scout both ways, from the founder perspective and from the VC perspective, but I was not being compensated at all because they knew that it existed, but they didn't tell me. So when that happened, I was actually genuinely happy for them, but I always felt this tinge of, I felt like a combination of like, that's kind of like underhanded, but I also felt like, oh, I have a good eye. Like I'm good at this. Like I have the chops. And I would go on and tell a few people about that when I was raising my fund. Like I have the chops. I saw that. And I'm not the first person this has happened to, or that this has happened. It's not like I'm some sort of victim that something has happened to me. I just want to tell you this story to ask you what you would do. So then years pass, and it's 2018 now, so that's 2.5 years later. And I've asked to be the subject of a very popular podcast called Startup, but that Gimlet podcast put together. And I was season 5 or 6 or something like that. And so I was the subject of it. And for 6 months, they followed me around. They talked to like 30 or 40 people in my life, including people like ex-roommates and like all. It was an incredibly intensive thing for like 6 hours of footage or like sound. And I couldn't control who they reached out to because it was journalistic in a way. So one of the people they ended up talking to was George, and I didn't know that, but they just knew the part about me trying to be as a apprentice. So I actually heard every episode as everybody else heard it, so I didn't know ahead of time what anybody said about me, good or bad. So I was listening to one of the episodes, and I love the series part, most of it. That I had some issues with it, but I did love the series, especially the first 2 episodes I thought were fantastic. And I'm listening to an episode, it's like whatever premiere date it is each week. I woke up like at 5 a.m. each time because I'm like, I have to hear this to see what kind of fallout there is from it. And I'm listening and I hear them talking to George Zachary. And he's like in Hawaii or something, and he has his dog in the room, and you can just see the shorts and the sandals on him. He's just so relaxed. Life is good. And he goes on to tell the interviewer, Amy, because she's like an investigative reporter, he goes on to tell her that I was never, this is the part that like stings the most, so it's going to be the hardest for me to talk about. He says that Arlan was never going to be his apprentice because I didn't have the network or the pedigree. I was never going to. And I didn't know that at the time. And not only did I not know that was the game we were playing, that he was just humoring me, but he failed to mention the fact that I brought him like one of the biggest deals that CRV has ever done. So I didn't have the network or the pedigree, but I had the talent. And if this is triggering you, I'm sorry, but you know if you know, you know? How often does this happen to us? So he said that it was out there and that hurt that day to hear that. But I also was like, yeah, okay, okay, bet. So I want to say a couple things. One is I can't remember when it was, maybe 2019 or something, maybe 2018. I can't remember the exact dates. But I flew from LA to San Francisco after I had the fund, after things were good, after probably I was on the cover of Fast Company by then, maybe, maybe not. But I flew to San Francisco to help Patreon at a time where they were going through some tough times on their DEI side. They had a lot of employees who were upset with them. And they brought me in, not paid, not paid, but they brought me in to talk to some of their employees and to a couple of their executives to see what could be done. And that happened a lot, so it's all good. So I did that. When I got out of the Uber or the Lyft, whichever one it was at the time, I fell right at their doorstep. I fell at their doorstep because of a problem with the sidewalk. And I stayed on the ground for quite a long time because I was in so much pain and I couldn't move. And I fell on my arm, on my elbow onto the hard concrete. And when I got up, I went in and they got me ice because it was so bad. The pain was so bad. And we talked about maybe we should postpone, but I had flown in just for the day. So I said no. And that injury lasted for more than a year. I could not lift anything with that arm, with my left arm. For a year, I could not put weight on it. I could not hold weight. Not once did I ever in a million years contemplate any sort of like action towards them, even though it was at their front door, it was something wrong with their steps. Not once did it ever cross my mind to do that. So that is to tell you that I have no interest in getting something that is not owed to me just because they are successful. That's just not how I operate. What I believe should happen is that I believe not even it doesn't even have to be me personally. It could be Backstage Capital. That would actually be much better. I think Backstage Capital should get the equivalent of whatever $25,000 that year is worth today. And if we do the quick math, I'll do the quick math. I'm going to say it's 400 times, but let's say divided by 4 million, 1.5 billion divided by 4 million is 375 times. And that is $9,375,000. Not almost, so a little over $9 million is what a $25,000 check would have been worth at the time if I had that money. Obviously, I didn't have it, so it's not like you can make that up that I invested. But you can say that uh if CRV put in 20 times that amount, they're sitting on 180 plus million dollars worth if unless they've sold some of it. And you can say that 5% of that should go to me because I introduced them to each other. Now, I think they're going to argue. Now, I have it in writing because I know the answer. They may argue, oh, we already had a relationship with them. They did not. Sam was thankful for me to introduce them. And George said in his in his response, casually, he said that another investor who had invested in Patreon in that same round made the introduction to this other partner. So I'm not saying I don't know what happened 100%. I don't know the timing and I don't know the timeline. But what I do know is that I was the first person to introduce Patreon to CRV. And that years later, there's never been one mention of it whatsoever from either of them. And that at the very least, I deserve that mention and I deserve that credit. And what's real is that I believe personally, this again is personal. This does not reflect any opinions of Backstage Capital team, just reflects my opinion that either Backstage Capital or I personally or a combination split in half should be paid this amount, $9 million or so. I think so. I could be wrong. I could be wrong. I'm okay with that. And I don't expect it to happen, to be honest. There's no legal recourse. There's nothing that anybody did that was illegal. It's just kind of like a decency thing. You know what I mean? It's like it's a decency thing in this world, in this country where Black women, and yes, I'm going to play that card because it's the card that I'm dealt. Black women are so often erased in these stories. I read about them all the time on like Instagram history channels where it's just like this black man discovered this and this black woman did this. There's a black man who wrote and came up with All in the Family, Good Times, etc. And Norman Lear just ran with it. Just said he did it. Black women, we're used to this, but we don't need to be, and we shouldn't be. We can't get used to this. This happens to us so often, but we can't get used to it. And I refuse to be okay with this. And I am going to post this, and that's why you're going to see it, because I'm going to post the hell out of this, because I'm tired. I'm tired of getting the crumbs from the cake and having things built on our backs. They're standing on our shoulders to do this. So I'm not going to get too far into it because I could get way further into this. But this is it. George, you never should have done that interview with Gimlet with your shorts on. You should have never done it. You shouldn't have said that out. You said the quiet part out loud, baby boy. You should have also recognized talent when you saw it. Sam and Jack, I've talked to you multiple times. I've even helped some of your employees make money um, in other ways. You know, I've been really good to this company and I have received zero response in the last few years. And you saw that like Patreon at one point was worth $4 billion during the bubble, the last bubble that we had. That's when I started really getting like oof, up in arms. And then they were had to slash that because a lot of companies did have to come back to reality, including my own. So I don't begrudge that, but I will say that you've seen how it can go away. It's not like it's just a given that you just get this. And I know it's not an easy thing to be a founder of a major company like this. I know that. But you should do what's right. I should have equity in this company. You should either buy me out for something I don't even own. The audacity. You should either buy me out or you should give me equity that can be sold. just like I've helped many of your, not many, just like I've helped a couple of your employees do, and you know who I'm talking about. Okay?